Yo, we back. Sky and Lucas back with you. Thank you for joining. Last episode, we had the quarterback free agencies. This episode, we're going to jump into the running back free agents. We got a handful of them. Again, some more fantasy relevant than not, but we want to make sure that you're at least aware of all these different names and potential moving parts. Of course, free agents can stay, but they can also move on. There might be some franchise tag issues in there as well. Before we dive into it, though, let's check in with Lucas. Lucas, how you feeling today, bud?
Feeling good. If you stayed till the end of the last episode, you know that I'm not a big fan of paying the running backs. So we'll have, I think we'll have a lot of differing, I don't know about different, but we'll have a lot of ranges of outcomes for how we approach these 10-ish players.
Let's jump right into it, man. We'll talk about one of the biggest names in fantasy football, one of the biggest names in the NFL, one of the biggest players in the NFL, potentially one of the biggest contracts as well, and an immediate candidate for a holdout, franchise tag, moving, staying. My man, Derrick Henry, absolute beast, 303 carries, 1,503 yards, 18 touchdowns, 200 and or excuse me, 18 total touchdowns, but he had 18 receptions, 206 yards, still just 26, which is kind of that middle of the road, but young enough for a running back. He also sat behind DeMarco Murray his first couple years in Tennessee, ran a shit ton of carries the last couple years, but didn't run too much at the beginning of his career. We'll see what happens there. I'm going to read a quick bio of each team, let Lucas jump in. We'll dive in with Derrick Henry here. Henry put the Titans on his back in their way to the AFC Championship, as we all know. He combined for 64 carries and 377 yards and a touchdown, while adding a touchdown pass in the win over the Patriots and the Ravens. Eventually, they lost to the Chiefs, of course, in their route to the Super Bowl. He was a beast and ran through defenders routinely. Younger beast mode, led the NFL in rushing with 1,503 yards, as I mentioned, and had over 100 yards rushing in 9 of his last 12 games. He did the same shit in 2018. And it has already mentioned in new negotiations to start at Zeke, which is it's about 6 years, $90 million with $50 million guaranteed for the contracts Derrick Henry wants from the Titans. I'll let Lucas jump in quick on the money side of things. Henry, still just 26, as I mentioned, is 1 year younger than Zeke Elliott. There's also the unlikely scenario he moves on from Tennessee, but that seems that pretty much unlikely, I think, because he single-handedly propelled them to the playoffs, and then Tannehill, of course, added into that as well. But the last 2 seasons, it's been Derrick Henry single-handedly bringing the Titans to the playoffs down the stretch. Lucas, I'll let you jump in right away, man. I know that you have a lot of different things. I think he stays in Tennessee and gets paid. We talked about Ryan Tannehill and Marcus Mariota, also some money negotiations on the last episode. Make sure you double back to Tuesday. Lucas, I'll let you jump right in here. What are the Titans going to do with Derrick Henry?
Yeah, so like we said, this is more than just how we think he's going to do next year. The whole offseason stuff happens to where even one minor change can affect the whole player's season. So for that, I think Jack Conklin, if you don't know, he's one of the best tackles in the league. I think he was like top 10 in PFF grade this past season. He's a free agent. And if you look at the O-tackle market, he is one of the only quality free agents you could say at the O-tackle. So that means supply and demand, he's going to get paid because teams are going to offer him that need a no-tackle. I think he returned to the Titans. He's been there his whole career. He's kind of a centerpiece for that O-line. And the Titans are sitting right around $48 million, which is like right. I think they're actually one above like the league average just collectively. So they have a lot to work with, but not necessarily. So if he does get paid the Zeke money, which is 11 mil, but who knows how much is guaranteed, that's going to take a chunk. If they get back Conklin, that's going to take a chunk. And then they're going to be left with no quarterback. So it's just kind of – it's not really like Cowboys Jr. in terms of cap space, but it kind of is, which is kind of surprising after the year they had. So what do I think they're going to do? I think they pay Henry. What should they do is they should not pay Henry, because I just think, like I said, don't pay your running backs. Look at the Cowboys. They're 8-8. They have all this talent in the world. They go like 8-8 every year. They never reach that hump, which the Titans won't if they roll with no quarterback and Henry. So, there's a lot of factors into it, but I think you could possibly see a holdout with Derrick Henry if he doesn't get paid, or a franchise tag, or just something could happen. He's kind of in that part of his career in between the rookie contract and his first big earned contract. You kind of see that holdout gap there. But if I had to pick I guess one or two other teams that he would go to. Obviously, the team has to be able to pound the rock, have to want to pound the rock. So I think I put the Colts, and I kind of just picked on the Lions to pick on them because they obviously want to pound the rock. So I think they are two different options that could happen. But like I said, I don't think a team's going to invest Zeke money in Derrick Henry as he's really only shown it for 1 year. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how that works.
I think he stays on the Titans, as I already mentioned, but I like both the Colts and the Lions as options there. You're right. They're run-first teams. Also, the Lions specifically, Kerryon Johnson, of course, we don't know what's going to happen there. Very promising younger running back, but injury prone, I think we can say at this point. If we can bring up those DBs and stack the box for Derrick Henry for the Lions, and you can turn Matt Stafford loose even more than he already throws the ball with Kenny Golladay, who led the NFL with 11 receiving touchdowns, Marvin Jones Jr., of course, Hawkinson, and even Amendola over the middle. I mean, the Lions could be kind of like sneaky dangerous if they get that kind of approach. And to get a good Bo Scarborough, I think would be a great move. So I think the Lions is a sneaky move that I haven't heard anybody else talk about with Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's kind of – I don't think Henry's going to sign on that, like, first wave is what I called it last episode, or that first day. I think it's going to kind of build up, and I don't know. It's tough because if you think about this, we have other guys, two specifically in our tier one, in Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler. If you're starting a franchise right now, would you take Melvin Gordon or Derrick Henry? Like, you want a running back that's going to catch the ball. That's going to be, you know what I'm saying? Less money. He's going to catch the ball. It's just kind of it's a good bit market and a bad market year for Derrick Henry to be the number one guy, I think.
So Derrick Henry, Melvin Gordon, and Kenyon Drake are all three running backs we're going to talk about today. They're all 26 years old. You just asked me the same question. I'll bring it back to you. Starting a franchise today, would you have Derrick Henry, Melvin Gordon, or Kenyon Drake?
Well, obviously they're not going to have the same contract or market value, so I would easily go Melvin Gordon. I think I don't want to say he's the better running back, but he's the most you can rely on him to not need to sign another running back in terms of actually using them just as a backup. But with Henry, you have to have that Dion Lewis or that third down back because he physically can't stay on the field for that many. Like, he can't stay on the field for 3 plays in a row because he's taking 6-7 yards of carry with 4 dudes on his back, and he's just not a receiver. I'm not saying he can't catch because he obviously week 1 he broke off like an 80-yard reception or screenplay, so he can definitely catch, but he's just not there, and you can't teach someone that. Like, that's just like a skill set that's completely different. So Melvin Gordon would be my answer, but I don't think Kenyon Drake's far behind because I am a big Kenyon Drake guy. I was last year, and then obviously he broke out at the end of the year with the Cardinals.
Cool. We'll get into Kenyon Drake in just a little bit, but the first player in Tier 1, of course, is Derrick Henry. Let's move down Tier 1 with the next two, and those are Chargers, both Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler. Let's start with Melvin Gordon here. 162 carries, 612 yards, 42 receptions, 296 yards, 9 total touchdowns. Again, 26 years old as well. After holding out for the first 4 games, Melvin got off to a slow start, failing to eclipse more than 50 total yards until week 9. Again, failed to eclipse 50 total yards until week 9, obviously hurting fantasy owners. After that, he did surpass 90 total yards in 5 of the next 9 games, went back to Melvin Gordon. He did play 12 games in both 2018 and 19, but his numbers were better in every single category in 2018. A lot of that had to do with his holdout and uncertainty from the team and the eventual status of fellow running back Austin Eckler, which we'll get to in just a little bit, who took the league by storm by being the number 1 running back overall in the first 4 weeks in Melvin Gordon's absence. I think we talked about Phillip Rivers in depth on the previous episode. I'm not going to talk about that much here. You could turn it back to Tuesday and check out our quarterbacks if you haven't already. And maybe another quarterback comes to the Chargers and mixes things up, whatever. I think personally that they push for a veteran quarterback like Brady, Andy Dalton, even Drew Brees, potentially to bring him back to the Chargers, who he started his career with, of course. And I see them letting Melvin Gordon go at this point, and then turning to Austin Eckler and another running back I really like in Justin Jackson. So I personally think that Melvin Gordon moves on from the Chargers. I'm going to hear your response from Melvin Gordon really quickly, and then we will talk about which teams we think he will land with if we think he's going to move on.
Yeah, I mean, Melvin Gordon's a good running back. Obviously, the money issue, which it's just the way the NFL is. It shouldn't be an issue because these guys should not be taking for granted the $2 million they're losing playing for $8 million and $10 million. That's just the way it is. You can't go about that. It's going to happen from now on to the future. It's going to happen with guys like Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook this year, maybe McCaffrey next year. Like it's bound to happen with the star running backs that kind of get this ego, but in a way they've sort of earned it. Melvin Gordon's definitely earned it. He's been a staple for that offense for the last 5 years or whatever he's been in the league. In terms of how I think it sort of shapes out, I think he's going to receive less money than Eckler due to age, due to kind of what's happened in the past. And I think that I don't really know because there hasn't really been like any interviews or any like articles on kind of how Gordon's approaching this offseason, which I feel like will be a thing come more March or end of February, because there's got to be some sort of think about it. He held out last year because he didn't get his $10 million from the Chargers, ended up coming back because he realized Austin Eckler was good. And if he didn't come back then, he was never going to – if he never came back last year, I don't think it would have been Love Bell all over again, and he would have signed on some crappy team on a bad contract. So I think I honestly think I put down the teams I want him to go to, but I think the smart move for the Chargers would be to get them both back, honestly, because Eckler's a restricted free agent. I don't know if a team's going to throw it all at Eckler because I like Eckler. I just don't know if Eckler can actually be an RB1 for a whole year. I don't know. I don't think he can take those 250 carries along with the receiving work. So it's just it'll be kind of interesting to see kind of how they go about that. If I had to pick my favorite destination for Gordon, everyone's throwing out Bucks and Texans. I actually want the Falcons to kind of throw something at him. I think the Falcons are, as weird as it sounds to say it, they are in win now mode. They are in that championship window. Just injuries have killed them the last 2 years. But I think adding a 3-down back like Gordon, and Freeman's not a big cap hit. I think he's like $3 million. Basically just upgrading Freeman to Gordon, I think would be huge. And then they can focus on O-line or defense or whatever they got to do throughout the draft. So if I had to pick a fantasy destination, I would say the Falcons for sure, and then throw in the Bucks and Texans. But I think the Chargers is not way out of the picture like people might make it seem this year.
Totally. I agree with all your points there. And you're absolutely right. He was going to hold out, and he realized Austin Eckler was the truth. And Austin Eckler in Gordon's spot in the first 4 games of the season, 80 total touches, 490 total yards, 6 total touchdowns to start 2019. Again, overall RB1 during that time. I did mention that I think Rivers moves on, whatever he moves south. We talked about that last episode. The Chargers have 2 options. They can either attack the quarterback position in the draft. They could get my man Herbert or other quarterbacks and start fresh and go up with Tyrod maybe getting the start there, or they can bring in a vet, as I already mentioned. If they go with the rookie quarterback, Melvin Gordon might be a perfect kind of blanket, safety blanket pitching outside, which basically, Phillip Rivers has had used him like that for the last 5 years anyway. Austin Eckler as well. But if they go with a veteran quarterback, I think that they might go younger at the running back and save some money there too. You mentioned Falcons being kind of a surprise pick maybe for you. I think that's a great fantasy destination, and you're right. Matt Ryan's not getting any younger. Julio Jones not getting any younger. And Calvin Ridley, of course. Hopefully, I think they have to retain Austin Hooper there and then get healthy on defense in the offensive line, and we can see what they can do. Another surprising destination for Melvin Gordon that I haven't heard anybody else talk about, at least my kind of bold prediction, if you will, for his landing spot would be the other LA team, and I think he might be a fit for the Rams. Todd Gurley could potentially be on his way out of LA, which if you're not following fantasy football as much as Lukas and I do all the time, this might be news to you in the offseason. But Todd Gurley could leave. He's expensive. He's fragile. He's got the knees. We understand that. I think he's a better 2-back situation somewhere else in a situation like that where he would better be as a tandem running back versus a feature guy. And we saw the Rams offense just completely implode on itself when it was based on Todd Gurley in 2018. And then he comes back 2019. He wasn't the same guy, and we saw it just be completely disgruntled. So Todd Gurley gets traded. Melvin Gordon, I think, could come in. and be a great dual threat running back. And I think equal to what Todd Gurley can do now for sure, and maybe even upgrade with speed and the versatility. Great running back in the red zone, which Todd Gurley's always been great at, and another safety blanket for Jared Goff there. So bold prediction for me, I guess, would be the Rams. Bold prediction for Lukas with the Falcons there. But either way, I think ultimately, do you think Melvin Gordon leaves the Chargers?
I mean, just like from an overall football perspective, because I kind of like I've been saying, I like to think of that in the offseason more so than just fantasy. I think no, especially because you made a good point with the Herbert, or if they trade up for Tua, they would easily just let Tyrod take it for a year, because I think the Chargers know they are, especially the last like 2-3 years, they are not in that championship window, which they don't need to be. Their defense is all 25 and younger, all very good, all get injured at different times. So just it hasn't been put together yet. But I think that they for sure need to get Herbert the weapons, or if they get Tua, the same thing goes. So I think they'll be in a good spot to get them both back, which, like we've seen the last couple of years, has worked for both of them in terms of fantasy and in real life. So I want to say yes, but I think it might be no.
The skill weapons there for the Chargers are also pretty young still. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, who still is looking for a big breakout, even though he had 10 touchdowns a couple seasons ago. I think he still is looking for that breakout. And Hunter Henry, if he can stay healthy and they retain him, we'll talk about Hunter Henry next Thursday on the the tight end episode for free agents. But their defense and everybody else there is young. Another skill possession, young player there with big promise is the other running back that we need to talk about here. Let's get into Austin Eckler. Restricted free agent, as you mentioned. I'll let you dive into that in just a second. 132 carries, 557 yards, 92 receptions. 50 more receptions than Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon had 30 more carries, just to put that into perspective. 11 total touchdowns for Austin Eckler, 9 for Melvin Gordon. Austin Eckler, 2 years younger, 24. We already spoke about the Chargers backfield for the most part with Gordon's breakdown. But again, Eckler is a stud and should be paid in 2020, in my opinion. He's a great pass catcher and showed the ability to make the big play. Ultimately, I see Eckler staying and Melvin Gordon leaving the Chargers. They're not going to play both. They're not going to pay both. And Austin Eckler, I think, would be significantly cheaper. So I would stick with Eckler, let Gordon walk, save some money there. I think Eckler stays on the Chargers, and I think Melvin Gordon moves on.
Just to start, think about this. Think if Gordon never came back, the stats that Eckler would have had. Like, would he have – like, it literally would have been McCaffrey. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's – Gordon had 42 catches. Obviously, you can't just, like, add that on. Like, so he'd have 134 or whatever you want to say. But I don't know. It's very intriguing to see kind of how high that ceiling would have been. But like you said, he's restricted. So that means if you don't follow along with that very often, obviously they can sign him, but to say the Niners want to sign him and they offer him $5 million for 4 years, the Chargers have the chance to match that and then up it to 5.1, and then they get him. So basically it's sort of a safety blanket. If you want to wait till the last second, if you don't get your guy, you can just throw that contract back on him. So Eckler's coming back unless some team throws a huge I don't want to say huge because he's definitely worth the 10 mil, I think, just because of the utilized skill set on both catching and running. But he's coming back unless some team goes all in, which I don't really know if any team will, just because he's really only shown it for that one season, really.
Yeah, I agree. And again, he was promising last year too when he was stepping in kind of as, that second tier. But again, you look at the stats. I'll just compare them really quick. Melvin Gordon, 162 carries. Austin Eckler, 132. 612 rushing yards to 557. 42 receptions, 50 more receptions for Austin Eckler. That's huge in fantasy football. 296 3, 700 more yards. I agree with you, man. I just think that Austin Eckler and Justin Jackson, I think, equals prime Melvin Gordon, which we saw just top 5 fantasy running back for years, top 6 fantasy running back. Austin Eckler was the number one running back for the first 4 weeks. We kept expecting him to kind of fall off when Melvin Gordon eventually came back, and it just never happened. very consistent, big play. He can sniff out the goal line stuff as well. So big Austin Eckler guy. And